Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. In our top stories in this edition of the news, there are fears of a possible escalation of the COVID-19 pandemic across the Republic of Cameroon after the government decided to lift some COVID-19 restrictions, notably on beer parlors and other entertainment sites, as well as transport. There has been a gross disrespect of the COVID-19 measures observed around the country, especially in beer parlors and other entertainment sites. Also in this newscast, we're going to take you to Bafut, one of the hardest hit localities in the northwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, where there has been in recent time a stiff battle between elements of the National Armed Forces and separatist fighters. Since the government of the Republic of Cameroon decided to lift some anti-COVID-19 restrictions, there has been a massive influx of persons into beer parlors and other entertainment sites around the country, and there are fears of a possible escalation of the coronavirus pandemic in the country after the government decided that beer parlors and other entertainment sites should be functioning again beyond 6 p.m. and there has been an increase, a significant increase in the number of persons streaming into bars and beer parlors or entertainment sites across the country. A case in point in this newscast, the Mongo Division, Littoral region of Cameroon. For me, I'm from Sanda.
1 month ago, ghost towns was the most appropriate way to describe most towns and cities in the Mongo Division of the Littoral region of Cameroon, following the 6 p.m. lockdown on drinking sports, restaurants and leisure places by the government of Cameroon to fight COVID-19. After a corresponding decision to lift days and other measures last Thursday, the streets of the Mongo Division were inundated by jubilant crowds of inhabitants. A comeback of inhabitants to the street, which according to local business operators is paying off. This woman sells roasted fish and says every night now is a business night in the Mongo Division, and she's happy that they have been relieved of the lockdown measure, which according to her was more of a prison. Those in the bakery sector say production has increased as restaurants now open at night with an increased demand for bread. This Cameroonian is in the commercial motorbike sector and says he is able to go home now with more than 5,000 francs each day to feed his family, something he could not do with the restriction of some activities at night. The joy is also highly felt by owners of nightclubs and snack bars in the Mongo Division, who can now sell till the next day. The doors of nightclubs, snack bars and other public places in the 13 divisions of the Mongo Division of the Littoral region of Cameroon flanked open and inhabitants fight in gross disrespect of other preventive measures against COVID-19 put in place by the government of Cameroon. While many bottles of beers were consumed, the risk of contracting coronavirus increased as more and more people march in, sitting very close to each other without wearing face masks. While others see the measure as a successful journey out of bondage, some inhabitants of the Mongo Division think it is a move that will get more Cameroonians infected by COVID-19. Snack bars, nightclubs and leisure places are now open in the Mongo Division of the Littoral region of Cameroon and the rest of the Republic of Cameroon beyond 6 p.m. The major challenge of authorities is to get inhabitants respect social distancing and the wearing of face masks as they drink and dance day and night.
And some health experts have said there is the risk of history repeating itself. A similar decision was taken by the deputy mayor of Marseille in France in 1720, and an infectious disease similar to the coronavirus killed more than half of the population of that part of France. And with a similar decision taken by the Cameroon government in 2019, there are fears that COVID-19 figures may speedily increase. Take a listen to Dr. Ivor Dita, Assistant Professor of Medicine at the University of Minnesota Medical School in the United States of America.
Certainly not neglect the socio-economic impact of the coronavirus on the population as a whole. At the same time, we must remember that we can always rebuild the economy, but we can never revive lives. This is the reason why I think governments around the world are taking very slow and deliberate steps to see how they can reopen in a way that is safe and protects human life. If we look back into history, we can quickly remember the story that occurred in 1720 in the city of Marseille in France, where a ship that was inflicted by a plague had been quarantined for quite some time, and then subsequently, because of the valuable goods that were on this ship, the leadership of the city decided to bring the ship on board. And Marseille ended up losing about 100,000 of its citizens. And that at the time, that represented about half of the population of Marseille. So again, the government needs to certainly weigh and balance how we reopen the economy while protecting human life. We have seen videos circulating since the government have lifted some of the measures that were put in place in order to curb the progression of the virus. Again, if you look at it very well, if there was only one thing we could do to curb down the spread and progression of the COVID-19, it would be social distancing. So you ask yourself the question, how can people social distance in a bar? That's probably not possible. And if we go by the videos that we saw circulating, we saw people celebrating, they didn't have any face masks, and they were as close to each other as if we were in a supermarket before COVID-19. So that's certainly very concerning, and I think the government should be very worried that perhaps the slow progression that we had seen in Cameroon may be put in jeopardy with this kind of measures. We also look at transport sector, where taxi driver is overloading, carrying more than the expected number in their taxis. I mean, how can you social distance in a taxi as such? It's practically very difficult. So if you go back to the off licenses, we could argue that the government could have started progressively by extending the hours during which the off license will be open, such that people can who leave work late can come in, get their drinks, go home, and have a good time with their families. But to say they will come and drink in this off license is probably, in my opinion, not the best way to go about uplifting these measures. Again, we can always rebuild the economy, but we can never revive dead people. These decisions being made by the government must be balanced and must weigh the impact when it comes to human life as well as the economy to ensure that we are not making a mistake.
Dr. Ivor Dita speaking to us from Minnesota in the United States of America, and the Cameroon government is continuing in its strategy against the COVID-19 pandemic. It has received a consignment of COVID-19 aid from the United Nations Development Program worth more than 2 billion francs CFA. The aid was handed over to the Minister of Public Health, Dr. Manauda Malachi, today in Yaoundé, and should indicate that the United Nations Development Program was assisted in that initiative by the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund. Innocent has more.
Both entities first signed documents, then followed by the handing over of a consignment of equipment to the Minister of Public Health to enable to take care of COVID-19 patients. This material gesture was handed by Jean-Luc Stallone, the United Nations Development Program representative in Cameroun. This is coupled with financial support from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
Aider à renforcer le système de santé pour faire face à la crise.
The stock comprises 2,400 thermoflashes, 120 respirators, and about 1 million masks. A command made by government of Cameroon and financed at the tune of $6 million, about 3 billion francs CFA, thanks to the cooperation with the World Bank.
Financière à travers des réallocations des fonds qui étaient destinés à la mise en œuvre du projet de renforcement de la performance du système de santé pour cette urgence.
Johanna Dukan, Health Program Director at the World Bank Cameroon, says it was imperative to disburse the special fund allocated for the fight against the pandemic.
Fonds de la SORC, de la composante SORC, pour un montant de 6 millions de dollars américains.
Dr. Manauda Malachi has assured these COVID-19 kits will be immediately dispatched to health centers across the territory.
Nous avons un ensemble de matériel qui vont être tout de suite, je tiens à le préciser, tout de suite être dispatché sur l'ensemble du territoire. Notre objectif, c'est la protection du personnel de santé.
That the ministry's objective is protection of health personnel, including those receiving COVID-19 patients and those working in laboratories.
Qui évalue, n'est-ce pas, le malade. Ça concerne le système de gestion d'incidents sur le plan régional qui va, n'est-ce pas, en termes des investigations, qui va au contact de la population.
The World Bank announces other stocks around $29 and $7 million.
And as some European countries ease coronavirus lockdown measures, the COVID-19 figures are on a sharp rise around the continent, and the COVID-19 cases has passed 1.5 million in Europe. That's Euronews.
After 2 months of a lockdown in Italy, parks and public spaces will now reopen their gates. It's the start of a gradual easing of the tight restrictions which saw the country hard hit by COVID-19. The mayor of Turin says there's extra public transport for an expected 80,000 people heading to work.
The means of public transport are sanitised. There are all the procedures that guarantee safety. There'll be signage showing how to get on and how to get off, and signage that enables people to stay 1 metre away from one another. Also, starting on Monday, it's compulsory to wear a face mask on public transport. If you don't have one, they'll be distributed by the region to all residents to be taken on board.
Meanwhile, in Spain, it counted the lowest daily number since the start, with 164 deaths on Sunday. The country had one of the strictest measures, and since the weekend, Spaniards have been allowed outside to exercise or go for a walk, with different times for different age groups. In France, Paris police have issued 64,000 violation tickets since the beginning of the lockdown. New measures will be announced this week as the death toll continues to drop. But from the 11th of May, masks will have to be worn on public transport and shops are scheduled to reopen. The UK is fast reaching Italy's fatality figures and could soon surpass Europe's worst hit country as the total number of deaths has now reached more than 28,000. This week the government will set out plans of how the country will get back to work, with more public transport and possible staggered work times. Meanwhile, Russia has seen a sharp increase of new virus cases, with more than 10,000 confirmed on Sunday. More than half of those were in Moscow. But officials say the increased figure is because of the rise in the number of tests. Louise Miner, Euronews.
And before we proceed on to something else, it is important to dismiss this fake news that has been circulating on the internet concerning the COVID-19 treatment with herbs by the Archbishop of the Douala Metropolitan Archdiocese of the Roman Catholic Church, His Lordship Samuel Kleda. Information had been circulating on social media indicating that he has published a list of herbs and some fruits that he combines together to produce a medicine that is administered to COVID-19 patients. And he said that he has never published anything like that. He has never published a list of herbs or fruits that could serve for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. And he indicates that he can't do that because persons who will go using those herbs must have a mastery of the herbs and must use it correctly, and there is a risk of people intoxicating the human system if he does something like that, if he publishes the list of herbs and other things that he's using for his COVID-19 treatment. He was speaking today at the Douala St. Paul and Peter Cathedral after receiving some COVID-19 aid from members of the Suivi Cameroun Survival Initiative of Professor Maurice Kamto. You see in the images the former Bar Council President, Barrister Yondo Black, who led the other persons with him, the other collaborators of Professor Maurice Kamto, to the Douala St. Peter and Paul Cathedral to hand over the aid to the Archbishop of Douala, His Grace Samuel Kleda. And I told you in the headlines that will take you to Bafut, one of the localities badly hit by the 4-year-long Anglophone crisis, and in recent weeks there has been a stiff battle between elements of the National Armed Forces and separatist fighters in that locality. Mbu Stella files in details from Bafut.
This was vibrant leisure center today, lined in grass. The 4-star hotel in Bafut has been the camp of Ambazonian General Alaji and his men. Within and without the locality, they were noted for kidnapping students, businessmen, seizing of landed property, and raining terror on the population.
I be happy where they did for year for peace, because no man no they will get for suffer. Any man like peace. So for all this while, where will be there? They need to come for years, so we'll be there for inside suffer. Anyway, for the worker, it will be there. They embarrass me anytime.
The fighters at the ranch were attacked by Cameroonian troops on foot. Nearby residents attest it was at night and the battle was the fiercest, judging from the sounds of gunshots they heard. Visible on the pathway are bloodstains. Bullet holes on some of the glass walls, an indication that during the battle to regain the Saddle Hill Ranch, lives were lost.
A good number of Ambazonians were neutralized, a good number. Around 15. You will see we have succeeded in this hotel, that resort, and you have lots of around 50 Dane guns and pistols and ammunitions and motorcycles and even a Fortuna car, 2 horses.
Prominent structures like this mission school, the over 600 years old Bafut Fund's palace, the markets, prominent road junctions now depict a picture of misery and hardship. This leisure center in Bafut might have been regained by Cameroonian forces, but their commanders say they are not stopping here.
We have to liberate the population of the Northwest. Whether those children like it or not, our population has to be liberated. Because there is no reason for us to leave their own children who have rebelled against them, continue harassing them, kidnapping them, and harvesting the small money that they have for their own benefits.
Brigadier General Cavalet and the Congress of Divine visited the now regained area, congratulating the soldiers and also warning them against looting the property left in the area.
Civil society leaders in the Republic of Cameroon continue decrying the poor conditions of detention in incarceration centers across the Republic of Cameroon. The inmates are living in very deplorable conditions, and some of them in the Maro Central Prison in the far north region of the Republic of Cameroon recently received some aid from the Italian cooperation from an Italian humanitarian organization. We have details in this report by Immaculate Fogwe.
Crowded prisons is one of the contributing factors to poor imprisonment conditions in Cameroon. Consequently, the prisoners are not well fed, with many of them offered poor healthcare services. Following the outbreak of the coronavirus in Cameroon, the risk of contamination in some of these prisons is high due to its overcrowded nature. It is against this backdrop that an Italian corporation known as Sente Gido donated consignment of gifts comprising of bags of rice, cartons of sugar, vegetable oil, to name but these, to prisoners of the Maro Central Prison in the far north region of Cameroon. The Italian corporation saw it necessary to help these inmates. These items will help sustain them during this crisis period. We thought about how vulnerable they are, reason why we had to carry out the gesture. We have sewing machines here that will help them upgrade their creative skills.
And this association is coming to our aid to give this important and necessary gifts to the inmates of the Maro Central Prison. It's normal to be say we are joyful and happy. And on behalf of the inmates, I want to tell them that they should be aware that the external community is thinking about them. And the proof is this community that have brought these gifts to them. They are not forgotten or abandoned.
The detainees were called upon to be disciplined and respect government anti-COVID-19 measures in order to reduce the spread of COVID-19 in the region, which is already affected by the coronavirus.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us in this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television. Now we talk press freedom in the Republic of Cameroon. Yesterday was Press Freedom Day, and this 2020 edition was observed at a time when tens of journalists are in detention in the Republic of Cameroon. Some of them have been detained for several months incommunicado. One of them is Samuel Wazizi, journalist with CMTV in the town of Boye in the southwest region of the country, who has been detained for over 9 months incommunicado, and today his whereabouts remains unknown to his lawyers, relatives, colleagues and friends, and it is not known whether he's still alive or he is dead. And we talked to an expert in security who works with the United States Homeland Security Department, Dr. Oscar Labang, and this is what he said.
Journalists in Cameroon, journalists in Africa, journalists all over the world are under such an attack that we have never witnessed in history, the history of journalism. On such a day, press freedom, we just have to continue to put pressure on the various stakeholders who continue to limit freedom of expression, who continue to limit freedom of speech. And it is important to note that your job as a journalist has never been harder than it is now, because we are living in an age where everybody assumes that they have information and they have the right information. And so journalistic reporting, investigative reporting is constantly being attacked. Journalists are constantly being attacked for telling the truth or for investigating and revealing facts.
I cited the case of Samuel Wazizi here in Cameroon. Journalist with CMTV in Boya was been detained for over 9
journalists, a student, a teacher, no individual should be held incommunicado. Under no circumstance should an individual ever be held in that situation. It goes beyond him being a journalist. It transcends that to the realm of human rights violations. Situation could be. So under no circumstance should an individual be held incommunicado. Under no circumstance should an individual be denied the right to legal representation. That is a gross violation of his right. First, as a human being, we continue, as I said at the beginning, to push this information, continue to pressure the authorities to understand that even if he committed a crime, he has a right to legal representation. He has the right to communicate with his family.
And concerning threats against journalists and media outlets from government authorities, Dr. Oscar Laban said this is unacceptable and cannot be tolerated.
It breeds the distrust that I have talked about earlier. Now, the minister might, let us assume that the minister has a basis for any necessary action against a media house. Does threatening that media house address that issue? It doesn't. There should be a more professional man on media houses. That's a key question we have to ask. There's a Ministry of Communication, there's a Ministry of Telecommunication, there's a National Communication Agency, and all those organs and institutions. Why not channel your complaint through those organs? Have them investigate. If they want to investigate Equinoxe, it's not a problem. Let them investigate. Threatening the journalists that are simply doing their job is not correct. Threatening the institution because the institution is reporting on issues that an individual does not like is not acceptable. And it's not something that the Cameroon government as a whole should tolerate.
From Dallas, Texas, United States of America. Talking Point is up next. Gabi Ambo is joining us from the Northwest Regional Capital, Bamenda, and with him we're going to be taking a look at the security situation of the Northwest and by extension the Southwest, the whole of Anglophone, Cameroon, and information reaching us from the Northwest Regional Capital, Bamenda, indicated that today was continued for close to 4 years today since the Anglophone crisis broke out late 2016. Mondays and sometimes other weekdays are observed as ghost town in several parts of Anglophone Cameroon. This is part of the struggle for the restoration of the statehood of the former Southern Cameroon state by the pro-independence. There has been a stiff battle between elements of the National Armed Forces and pro-independence fighters in the recent weeks, and He was there on a fact-finding mission with some officials of the United Nations organization, and Gabiambo will be having some connection issues there. He will not be joining us in this edition.